You know what I'm betting you're really good at? Making excuses. And with the new year getting closer, I want to talk about a bunch of typical excuses that I see tech leaders use to allow themselves to hold their teams back. Cut it. In this video, we'll cover a few of these common excuses and how you can stop using them, where most of the times it's about realizing how you need to change your mindset and how you can lead your organization forward and make something that actually propels them to get more momentum, as opposed to just using these excuses to maybe feel a bit better about yourself but don't get a lot of results. If this is your first time tuning to this channel, I'm Ben-Yosef. For the past few years, I've been helping tech executives create organizations worth leading, because life is too short to lead average teams. And these excuses, as you might guess, are things I see repeatedly. It's not just a one-time story that I'm recounting. These are things I've seen all over the place with startups, big and small. So with that out of the way, let's start with number one. We have too much tech debt. Don't we all? This is something that engineers just love to use. Everything that's a bit taking a bit too long, that's slow, that's problematic, that's hard, is all about tech debt. We just can raise our arms in frustration, say, "Oh, I'm sorry, too much tech, that's gonna take too long." Or, "Oh, it's that part of the system, yeah, that's a tricky area." Or that, "Yeah, that's the legacy system." We've got so many of these phrases to just say, yeah, we have some crappy code that we wrote, and now it's hard for us to maintain. Let me tell you one thing. There's no such thing as tech debt. Okay, well, there is code that is hard to maintain, that maybe ought to be rewritten, refactored, whatever you want to do. And no, I'm not oblivious to the fact that good code helps. I've been engineering since I was 9. However, it is not an excuse. I always say that we have to factor the cost of tech debt into making things better. Instead of saying, "Oh, sorry, tech debt," we need to say, what do we need to do in order to show value as fast as possible, and in order to ensure that making these sorts of changes, if they're going to be happening a lot, and investing in those parts of the code, are going to show us a positive return on investment. So if there's an area of the code that always takes weeks to change, and we're going to have to do it a lot, you can't just say tech debt. I want you to come up with a way to make that less of an issue. Sometimes it is about refactoring. Sometimes it is about finding a new technical innovation. Maybe we can integrate a new framework or a third party in order to make that easier. That's fine. But when you consider the problem from the point of view of the investment you have to make, of how do we make this into a change that's actually profitable, that makes sense for the company to decide to do, as opposed to saying, "Ah, sorry, it's going to take 3 months." If you view it from that point of view and consider all the options you've got, all of a sudden you have more options available to you, and you can come up with better ideas to approach it, as opposed to just saying, "Yeah, we're going to take 2 senior engineers and let them have at it for 2 months." Sometimes that's the best route, but more often than not, we have better ways around this. And because we feel like tech debt is something that we have to treat, we sometimes forget that there are better ways of doing it. The problem with tech debt is that there's only so much you can cut, right? Even if we rewrote the entire system right now, it won't make our company successful. It won't solve all of our problems. Therefore, aiming to reduce all your debt just makes no sense. This is not like real financial debt. Instead, think about how you can make the system something that you can change more freely, especially in the areas that matter the most for the business. This should be your yardstick, making changes effectively, as opposed to having clean code, having code you're proud of. Yeah, everyone should care about the craft. We should care about the code. It's not supposed to be a big ball of spaghetti. However, The most important thing, as Kent Beck taught us in his 4 rules of simple software design, the first thing is the code works. It has to achieve its business goal. Otherwise, I don't care that it looks great. I don't care that it's tested. It's not going to help anyone. On we go to excuse number 2, the product people ain't perfect. Ugh, who would have thought? I see engineers constantly bemoaning the fact that product gives them product specs that aren't perfect, that have issues, and we have this back and forth, and we have to ask them questions, and maybe they change things after we've started implementing it a bit. Well, guess what? You're not working at NASA. There's no reason to aim to have product specs that are so detailed that every edge case is already explained and everything's covered, and the engineers can just go merrily coding without ever having to talk to anyone. That should not be your goal. Because when we do it like that, when we think that's the right case, first of all, we're going to make everyone waste so much time because they're going to be making all of this planning when often just asking a few guiding questions about how to address different edge cases would be more efficient. Also, aiming to have such a high bar for product specs means that they're going to be way less efficient. They can't handle too many things going at once, which usually means that we're going to say, oh, we need more product people in the company. Usually, that's not the right way of solving it. Instead, we need to give the engineers enough context and enough understanding to be able to make all of these micro decisions by themselves, as opposed to asking products to spoon feed them every little decision. Add to that the fact that when I look at product specs and I see engineers saying, oh, this is not perfect, da da da, I keep asking, are you always submitting pull requests that have no bugs whatsoever? Are you always right when it comes to breaking down tasks to remember all of the different edge cases? Do you always know exactly what you need to do in advance? Do you never have bugs or pull request comments or the need to fix something after you deployed it? No, right? If your boss would come and tell you you can never have anything not perfect merge into main from this point into the future, you'd likely quit, right? Because you're not NASA. However, we seem to think that it's okay to require something entirely different from the product people. I don't agree. We're all humans, and we need to embrace the startup factor. That's the fact that startups are going to benefit from making mistakes, from having things not entirely listed out whenever we start everything, from having this back and forth. Never talk about handoffs between product and engineering because that means we want to have silos. We define this API, Jira based or whatever, for communication between these two orgs, and that's it. No, that's not what startups should look like. Instead, be okay with the vagueness. It doesn't mean that product specs can be utter garbage, but it does mean that we need to discuss the level of details that we expect. And maybe in some cases, it should be more detailed out. For example, if we're touching something that has a lot of nasty business logic that's regulated and we cannot make any mistakes, as opposed to just working on most of the features where we don't have to have them list out every single if in the flow before the engineers get to it. We can just talk. You know, it's a concept. Another excuse for why things aren't going as well as you would have liked: plans keep changing. Oh, boo hoo. You're working in a startup and you don't have the roadmap for the next 5 years just set and be constant? Who would have thought, right? When I see engineering organizations whining about things changing all the time, I realize that they don't understand what a startup means. Instead of bemoaning the fact that things will change, because that's a constant. That's a startup land for you. Things will change. Okay, they will change because of the business. They will change because the CEO read something on Medium and would like to implement that. They will change because all of a sudden we have this big prospect. There's a big conference. There's a pandemic. There's a war. Things will change. That is the constant. So instead of saying, no, you cannot change plans, I'm okay with not changing and breaking sprints every second on a whim. However, you should stop being angry at the world for not being more straightforward and expected. If we'd have no surprises, you wouldn't need startups. You just know exactly what would work and implement that. Instead, we should embrace the fact that this volatility is where startups, the good ones, can really shine. So have that mindset in your organization where, yeah, things will change. What does that mean? How do we use this volatility as an offensive weapon as opposed to something that we keep whining about? So, for example, how can we implement our features in a way that allows us to change directions faster? So, usually that means we break things down into shippable chunks that allow us to decide right on the spot every week, every couple of days, if we want to keep working on this or change lanes. It means that we don't have this nagging force of habit to implement everything to the umpteenth degree where it's perfect if we're not sure it's still going to be used a week from today. Maybe we can start with implementing things at a proper okay level, ship that, see if it's used, see if we're not changing directions a minute later, and then decide if we want to keep reinvesting in it and make it better. The most important thing is to realize that, yeah, change is going to happen. There's no way around it. So you can decide to be one with the change. You can realize that it's going to happen, and therefore the way for your organization to shine is to just expect change. With that in mind, if we know that 50% of what we're working on will change in the next couple of weeks or next quarter, how will you implement things differently? How will you view your tech roadmap differently? Have that in mind as you're planning, so you're not going to get surprised. Instead, you're going to expect the unexpected. You're going to see the changes coming and go with the flow. There's no other way to do startups and retain sanity. And then we have especially the managers and the senior tech leaders who bemoan the fact that their people are not good enough, are not experienced enough. And this is something that, first of all, you know what I say when I hear someone complain that, oh, all of our middle managers aren't good enough, or our team leads are all inexperienced, or our senior engineers aren't really senior, it seems. You know what I ask? Who got these people here? Unless you just took your position, I'm guessing you have a lot of responsibility for these people being in place, right? It's your hiring pipeline. And even more important, it's your coaching framework that has allowed them to remain as they are as opposed to growing much faster. I really think this is an excuse that we've gotten used to using to allow ourselves to work much slower. Our people are at this level and therefore we cannot be moving any faster. The question is, let's take a few steps back. How did we get there? Because if you're not thinking about the root causes here, you're going to get even more people who are at the same level or have the same issues, and you're not going to make your people improve and grow. You need to keep in mind that no one remains constant. Therefore, your people are either growing if you're helping them and coaching them, or if they're cruising or on autopilot, they're becoming worse. Okay, there's a talent inflation. With time, what you can do at this level is no longer worth as much a year from today. So if your people are not actively getting better, they're going to see the inflation of talent eat their lunch. So instead of bemoaning inexperienced people, people not good enough, they're first timer as managers, ask yourself, can I make things better? Can I coach them? Can I train them? Can I send them to conferences? Can we have group coaching work together so I can coach 10 managers in one session as opposed to feeling like I'm overwhelmed working with them one on one? Can I see if they can learn from the better ones? If you have pockets of seniority in your organization, can you make those people mentors so you can start making everyone better? This is the only path forward, realizing that you can't just wave your arms and say they're not good enough. The question is, how can you make them better? I mean, these are the people you've got. Either you're going to be replacing them or you're going to have to find out a way to win with them, right? There's no other solution. You can just give up. I don't think that's the topic of this week's video. Relatedly, another excuse I keep seeing is, ah, they need me so much. They're so dependent. I can't be a senior executive. I cannot work at that altitude. I cannot be strategic because they keep pulling me into the tactical stuff. Well, again, whose fault is that? Who has trained them to be in that position? Who keeps enabling them and not helping them grow, not helping them become better, not giving them the tools to do those things to allow you to do what you want to do? This is something that so many VPs of engineering I work with keep saying, oh, I'm sorry, but I cannot focus on these bigger picture things, or I cannot attend those board meetings, or I can think about the strategy with the co-founders because I've got all of these fires to put out. What you're saying is, sorry, I'm doing my work so lousily, I cannot do the real important stuff. I've got all of these urgent things to do, which are urgent things in my making. I made all of this happen, and sorry, I'm too busy. Nah. Instead, I want you to take responsibility and say, what can I do to help our people get better and need me less? There are two things here to keep in mind. One, you need to do the coaching we just talked about to ensure that people become better genuinely and learn how to work better. Maybe you have mentors to help them so you don't have to be there. That's one. However, two is also realizing that sometimes your involvement is actually the right thing to do. You should not expect to be completely disengaged from the day to day, like some VPs I know think is the right thing. And sometimes they even do that even when the organization is on fire. No, people use and abuse those Steve Jobs quotes about getting brilliant people and letting them manage themselves, letting them tell you what needs to be done as opposed to telling them what to do. Yeah, but if you've ever read anything else about Steve Jobs, you know that he micromanaged people like crazy and kept telling people exactly what to do. So uh, what you need to do is realize that you, as a leader, need to be there. You need to give them guidance. You need to be approachable and not disengaged. You have to know what's going on. However, you need to see that you're not becoming a crutch. So, being present, being approachable, and being there to help them doesn't mean that you should be giving them all the answers. Doesn't mean that you should always spoon feed them the solutions. It means that you need to use those opportunities to spot where people need to grow and give them that feedback. Give them a path forward to learn how to do those things on their own. Give them the tools, give them the guidelines. Think about how can we make this something that doesn't repeat itself? Okay? Think about the root causes and imagine how can we make them more self-managing without just, pushing them into the deep end and hoping it's going to be fun. Oh, look at the time. I really got to go. Last excuse, not enough time. Well, guess what? No one's got enough time, and yet we all have the same amount of time and the same amount of hours in a day. So you have to learn to make do. If you need more time, how can you create it? How can you make your team more effective? I keep talking about making our teams increase their efficacy so we don't have to burn the midnight oil. We don't have to work long hours. My favorite story is how I stopped working at a startup. We worked like 12, 13, 14 hours a day for a few weeks until I fell asleep at the wheel. And then I said, sorry, not going to do that anymore. And I went back to regular working hours. And guess what? I became more productive. Everyone else became more productive because what you need to do is not just work harder, slamming and banging your head into the wall. Instead, think about how can we work smarter? And that's not something we usually do when we know we're going to be sitting in the office all day. So working smarter, for example, means investing in engineering velocity, investing in tooling to make our people work faster, make it easier for our people to make mistakes. So if it's easy for me to undo a mistake, I will usually work faster because I know I can undo a mistake, as opposed to knowing that every keystroke might break production. Then I'm gonna be very wary and type very slowly. However, if I have this support system, I can work faster. So invest in engineering velocity, like feature toggles, like having quick rollbacks. When you have that, people can work faster. Also, think about how can we make everyone work better? Can we streamline processes so that we don't have to go through dozens of checklists, but instead have things be automated? Can we create tech capital, which is tech that's not features, but actually code and tooling that helps everyone become better? Engineering velocity is a private case for engineers, but can you do the same for others? So if marketing keeps coming to you because they need to make a lot of changes to tests and create A/B tests and test their emails, etc., and each one of those require engineering attention, think, can I use this as a tech capital minute and say, okay, I'll create a tool for you, maybe using AI to do it much faster, so you can iterate on those A/B tests by yourself for 80% of the time. For the edge cases, they'll still need engineers, but most of the time they can do things themselves. When you do that, all of a sudden, you just made work smarter, not harder. You just made a whole set of problems become non-problems. And this is how you ought to work, because we all don't have enough time. The question is, how do we leverage the time we've got? Like investing, like seeing compound interest. You can just let your code do just what you have it do, just code it one feature at a time. Or you can think, how do we make these systems that make us work even faster as the company grows, as the organization grows? I think that this is at the root of the most effective teams I've worked with. So think about that. And now we're really out of time. So thank you for watching this. If you want to get a bit more information about creating amazing tech teams, I think that you're going to like this video, which is related. Thanks.